And he's going to tell us about online grammar course for students of German. So the talk will last about 20 minutes, and then we take questions right after, if that's okay with you. Because people can move around if you want to attend some other session, in between sessions, if you want. So we take questions after each talk. So I hope you enjoy it, and I leave Jonas with it.
Thanks, Annika, and thanks for coming. Yes, this online grammar course for students of German is something we introduced last academic year, so 2011-2012, for the first time for our first year post-A-level students. Obviously, grammar has always been taught at Bristol, so it's not very new we're teaching grammar, it's just that the way it has changed we teach grammar. And I think regardless of the approach you choose, the objectives are always that you want to consolidate and enhance students' grammatical knowledge, to improve their spoken and written German. And there's also always this element, this will be tested at the end of the year, and this component in Bristol is called the guided writing test. So you want your students to be able to pass this test, but also, I mean, grammar is very important for all the other components that are tested, essay and so on and so forth. So before we moved to this structure, German language teaching in first year post-A-level looked like this. They had 2.5 hours of integrated skills classes per week where we did speaking, writing, so all the skills. And then they had, this was in small groups. And then we had a grammar lecture, which was an hour per week taught to the whole first year cohort. We were then told we have to reduce our teaching to 3 hours a week, so we would have lost this half an hour, which is that in one teaching block we had 2 hours and the other had 3 and therefore 2.5. So we could either have just said, okay, in that case we only have 2 hours of integrated skills per week, and then the 1 hour grammar lecture. We decided to go a different approach, to have 3 hours of integrated skills, and then an online grammar course for, I mean, it's up to the students for how many hours per week they spend on it. Why did we decide to do it this way and not the other? First of all, the grammar lectures were not very well attended. Students also, it was a lecture to the whole year, but students were also asked every week to do exercises which were then discussed in the lecture, but those exercises that the students hardly ever did at home. So the member of staff who taught this lecture was always very frustrated and wasn't very happy that it all went. I think partly this was because the students, I think, as everywhere are, although they're coming with an A-level in German, are mixed ability. So if you cover too basic stuff in the lecture, then those who are really good get bored. If it gets too advanced, it might be over the head of some of the weaker students. I mean, this is always a challenge, regardless of what approach you choose. But I think in particular, lecture is not the right format to address these. It's very hard to do so. Also now, by having 3 hours of integrated skills, they get more teaching in smaller groups rather than in our lecture format. It enables the students to work in their own time and at their own pace, so that they can pick and mix, so that if they think they need to spend more time on the passive in German, then they can go back to that and spend longer. Others might just skip the tutorial actually and just do the test. So it's up to the learner's preferences. However, it doesn't cater for different learning styles, obviously, because it's just what's there. And hopefully this would give them not just a better understanding of German grammar, but also enable them to become more independent and autonomous learners, which is a skill in itself. So I would briefly like to show you what this grammar course looks like, and then talk about the reactions of staff and students to it. I mean, luckily we had the grammar lecture before, so we could base the topics and the structure of the online grammar course on the grammar lecture. So when I took over, I hadn't done the grammar lecture before. I knew which topics need to be covered. And also the sequence, although we used to be slightly shifted those around. It's accessed through Blackboard, which is our virtual learning environment at Bristol. And then for almost every week, so 19 in total, we've got 22 teaching weeks, so there are 3 weeks where we don't have a tutorial and a test. But otherwise, for each week there's a tutorial and then a test testing the grammar topic discussed in this tutorial. The tutorials are in English, and then for the test, the students get randomly questions. When we designed it, and I really have to thank all my colleagues in the German department, because the design of the tutorials as well as the questions was really a joint effort. The whole department shipped it. So not just those teaching language, but also lecturers, professors who helped us, which is helped in terms of workload. Obviously, at the same time, you all have different views of how it should be done, and you might have to change things. Yes, for the test, the questions are randomly selected, but they're also divided into easy, moderate, and difficult questions, so that students look at this a second time, the questions might be different or will be different, but always the level of the test should be the same difficulty. We then did additional exercises in class, although in the first semester, when we introduced it to a lesser extent, and organized face-to-face tutorials every 3 to 4 weeks, but we had a very low turnout again to those ASTI lectures, and later we decided to drop these, because it wasn't just worth our time, really. When I just said all our colleagues helped it, but they just typed it into Word documents, these tutorials. So it was then down to only 3 members of staff, so myself and 2 of my colleagues, who using Wimba Create converted these tutorials, and for the tests, the software we had, this was a question mark perception, and we had to be trained partly on this because we hadn't used it before. This all started only in summer 2011, so when the students started using it, we hadn't finished it all. So some of the later tutorials hadn't been finished by then. So we worked on this until Easter 2012. And we collected feedback after the first year, and we tried to improve it over summer 2012. Hopefully now there's more or less done. There's constantly something to do and to improve, but most of the work should be done by now. Obviously still, whenever it runs, we have to administer the course, we have to remind the students, we have to run reports to see have they all done it, how well have they done it, and just talk to them if they don't do them or don't do very well in them. I'll just show you now. So, as I said, so it's on Blackboard, and then you can see here there's a link to the online grammar course, and we've got different folders. So there's an introduction, just generally again, although if we tell them in integrated skills classes how it should work, but they can read it again. And then for each week we've got a folder. And one of my favorite topics is the passive, so we have a look at the passive. In that folder then there's a link to the tutorial, which takes you to and for example, the work we've done over the summer said to make sure that they have the same structure, so everything starts with every tutorial should start with the aims and objectives of the tutorial, give a short introduction, and we also try to add more things which make it slightly maybe more interesting to the students, so they not just read, but also can click on transitive verb, and then they get a new window opens and they get an explanation of what the transitive verb is, to include pictures, for example, to make it a bit more interesting, flip cards where they can test themselves conjugating the verb, for example, and then also small tests, for example, just quickly to check in between whether they've understood it so far. And then at the end, for each tutorial, there's it says further readings to the grammar books we use for our teaching, and we should do more reading. Again, just basics, the essential German grammar, or if they want to know even more in detail the topic, they are asked to look up in Hammer's German grammar. And then just, again, a reminder that they should do the test, which takes us back to this link. That is luckily now with the Blackboard connector for question mark is in the same place. Before they had to go to a different website, but now it's all in one place, so they click on that. And then can start the test. That didn't work. maybe I'll be able to sort this out later, because I will also, you will have a chance to have a look at this yourself after lunch if you want to. If you come upstairs and you can sit down, I'll lock you on to Blackboard and have a look. So that this should have taken you to the test, where you are given instructions again, and then there is a time restriction. I mean, there's something you could think about. Maybe we should just get rid of it and say they can take how much time they like. There's a recommendation which we had to change now with the Blackboard connector. First, in the first year, when they had failed the test, so they said they should reach 50%, otherwise they had failed. They couldn't retake the test immediately, but they had to wait 2 more days. The idea was that they used those 2 days to go back to the tutorial, do some additional reading in the grammar books, and then hopefully with that information we'll be able to pass it the second time around. The good thing about the Blackboard connector now is that if they go to their gradebook on Blackboard, they can always see how well they did in the test they've done. Okay, views by members of staff. Obviously, there was a workload issue. It was a lot of work, especially in the first year, to design all these tutorials, to convert them all, to also then to look at the reports and check that students did the test. And then I had to get to grips with this, how you run these different reports. We had to review it and then change a few things. There were also a few issues with the software. With Wimber, for example, we have weird problems like the colors didn't really work, the character spacing, so really small issues actually which you thought should have been simple, but they weren't, and even the experts weren't able to help us sometimes, or when you wanted to include a table of film clips, for example, it wasn't that easy. Question mark perception is that you've got a limited choice of question types, so sometimes it's very hard to find an appropriate question type for what you actually want to test. And you had to enter each question separately if you want to have if you want them to be randomly selected, if the students just do the tests. We realized it needs to be better integrated into teaching. Students needed a bit more help than we offered them. Same time, when we did, but in addition, ours they didn't actually attend these tutorials we offered in addition to that. I should have said in terms of workload, I think in the long run, hopefully this will now be a lot easier. I mean, we don't have to take in grammar texts throughout the year again and sit at home and mark them to give them feedback. This is now all done automatically, so that should hopefully help. The good thing was that my colleagues also said, oh, well, actually, it's a good thing, we should make it available to other students. So we've been, the language center doesn't no longer exist at Bristol, but it's now all in the School of Modern Languages. So we made it available to those students as well, for example, and also to our ab initio students after their first year, so that they could work on it over the summer. And then at the end of the year, we collected feedback from the students. So there was the last week of teaching. We had a very small year last year, 39. We got 38 questionnaires back. And luckily, 84% thought it was a really good course. So that was nice to hear. And even more so that learning objectives and instructions were very clear. So that was quite a relief. But still, as you can see, not everyone thought it was a good course, and they also mentioned a few things that could be improved. Also have to say, so it was week 24, there was still 2 or 3 weeks until the exam, and lots of students, 2/3 of our first year students, used the online grammar course in that period to revise. We asked them how many grammar tutorials tests did you actually do, and as you can see, the red is the tutorials, blue is the test. I mean, most, luckily there's quite a high number here, they did them all at least 16 to 18 out of 19. For the tutorials, we just have to believe the students, because we do not really know, even if they click on the link, then have they actually gone through the whole tutorial or not. Whereas with the test, we can see, and what they say, yeah, matches our report more or less, so that they seem to have been honest. And then also because it was meant to be for all students, but also if they're stronger students, then that they do not necessarily have to do all of them, and I think they actually already know everything about the passive, then I think it's not too worrying that not all students have done all the tutorials or tests if they don't think they have to, although we have to be careful they might misjudge their ability, obviously. We also asked them how often they did it. Again, for the tutorial, we don't know whether it's true. Most of them only seem to have done them twice. Actually, if we look at our reports for the test, we have the impression that more students did them more than just once, than the 30% here, and even 3 times or even more. I mean, there were students who did them 7, 8 times sometimes, and this doesn't really become obvious in this, so I don't know why not more students had ticked that box. When did they normally do the tutorials or tests? Quite a few, most of them weekly, then every 2nd week, once a month, shortly before the exam, or during the Christmas and Easter vacation, or no regular pattern. Again, I mean, the idea was, as you can see in the folders of week 1, week 2, that they should do one every week. At the same time, this is there so that they can do them in their own time, at their own pace. As long as they've done them all by the time of the exam, they should be prepared. So it's up to them. So again, I'm not too worried about this. When did they do the test? Normally immediately after the tutorial. I think that makes sense. A few did them a bit later, and normally did the test a lot later than the tutorial. A few reasons why they didn't do all tutorials or tests they forgot to. Okay, I mean, this is the same as forget to attend the lecture or the class. I mean, there's probably not much you can do about that than remind them, which we did. They had other more important things to do. I mean, I doubt that, but what's more important than German grammar? They find that frustrating point is stressful, a few said, so, which was only mentioned for the tests. So this was our main reason for concern, and something needs to be done about this, and I think we did this over the summer. Why did they do tutorials or tests several times? Because they weren't satisfied with their result. I think that's very good if they take responsibility for this. Okay, I need to work harder, so I'll do it again. Or they found the topic difficult, they used it for revision, so I think that's actually exactly how we intended, that they can go back to that again and do it again if they need to. Reasons for doing the test without a tutorial: knew the grammar topic, I was already covered in class. Again, if they think that's really the case, we have to trust them, and then that's, I think, fine with us. We also want to know how much time did they roughly spend on the online grammar course. Most of them 21 to 40 hours in total. So this is almost as if they had a 4th hour of German tuition. So actually, it's not a real contact hour, but at least it's a tailored program for them. It gives them some additional input, which we designed. And it's also giving us roughly per topic, it should be at least an hour for the tutorial and the test. Now, how did that change the students' grammar knowledge? It's unfortunately very hard to say. I mean, the easiest would be to compare the grammar test results of the cohort before and then of last year. But there have been so many changes in our assessment pattern, so that it's very hard to compare those. And also, I mean, we could say maybe better anyway when they came in as this year, so it would have been hard. Hopefully, in the future, I'll be able to run a few more projects, asking students to do a test, then give them the tutorial, and then let them redo the test and see whether this has changed the result of the test, and hopefully it has improved. We had the notion that all of the results in the end of the grammar test seemed to be better, but there definitely were fewer fails than we usually had. It was also, I mean, maybe even you could say quite satisfying to see that those students with the worst results were those who had done fewer tests than all the others. So that might tell you that it probably helped those students who did the test to achieve better results. We had 2 students who still failed the grammar component. One of the students had only done 3 out of 19 tests, the other 7 out of 19 tests. But on the other hand, you can't say that those students who did all the tests and did them more often than others got the best results. Those who got the best results, we had quite a few very good students. Only 6 of them did all the tests. And then, for example, there was one student who actually only did 7 out of the 19 tests and still got a first in his But maybe that was one of these students who already came in with a very good grammar knowledge and didn't need those to do and would have been bored in the grammar lecture. That's the feedback what they thought was very positive things about the online grammar course. Instant feedback, only one student, more time for other things in class. They knew what to expect in the exam, quite a few. And then also, I mean, if you take the next two together, they saw it as a very useful revision tool. I said that 2/3 of the students actually use it as a revision tool after teaching it finished, and we don't know how many did it actually during the year. And they liked it. Again, that was the idea that it can be done in own time and anywhere. There were a few disadvantages they mentioned. The first one goes back to what I said before, that these tests may have seen sometimes pointless, frustrating. There were lots of technical issues, but also problems which we could solve, and I think we probably have solved over the summer. They found it easy to forget. Yes, okay, maybe we have to remind them more often in class, and we do this. I think just sending out emails didn't really work. I never read the emails, so you really have to talk to those students who haven't done any of them yet. They want to be taught by a real teacher. This is essential for some topics you cannot ask questions. Yes, I agree. That's why we're again doing a bit more grammar this year in our classes on the topic that is the week's topic for the grammar tutorial on the online grammar course. They prefer other resources. I mean, you cannot always please all students, but grammar books they still could have used anyway. I mean, so no one stops them from doing that. And I think that's important to bear in mind. Yet another activity that requires the use of a computer. So, yeah, we always speak of all these students, they all have computers and mobile phones and they're all digital natives. No, not everyone really likes that, so we have to bear that in mind as well. So what we did, I already said we changed the structure of the tutorial slightly, trying to incorporate more interactive elements, for example. And I think most of the work has gone into the tests though, actually, so there's now more feedback. So if they get an answer wrong, depending on the question again, either they get the right answer or at least if they get an explanation why this is the right answer. I think that is very important. I've already touched upon this, that we do more grammar teaching in class now. Offer weekly face-to-face tutorials. We've decided not to, we can't offer now additional weekly hour, we don't have the resources to do this. But I think by doing this in class already helps. Make the course available for Year 2 students, again a positive thing, so it seems to be something they appreciate, and actually it's what we've done anyway now. As you can see on the last point, we made it available, and even actually for Year 4 students who are still struggling with grammar, they said, we've heard about this, could we have access to that as well? And so they can now do it as well if they want to. And I think that's already said most of those things that we've done. We integrated also grammar films, which our Year 2 students did on certain grammar topics. If you're interested more into that, my colleague Keith Kreutner will talk about this tomorrow at the Learning Symposium. So finally, I think the potential has been realized that this is mobile learning and to be useful as a revision tool they can do when they like or often they like. It offers maybe another contact hour, but also that blended learning is important. You can't just do it all online, you need to incorporate it into class. Feedback, as we always see in NSS, is very important. It has to be timely, it has to be good. And I think this has been, hopefully, is already better now. But it still requires a lot of time from students and staff to do that. Hopefully less time from us in the future than for the first 2 years. Okay. Thank you. I just like the contact details. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Do you get the exercises, do you do them yourself or you get lots of them for the web?
Yeah, we do them ourselves.
You did, and you could do them in Blackboard?
You could use the test function in Blackboard. We used this question mark, but unfortunately didn't work. I wanted to show you what the test looks
so
like.
So if you use Blackboard, it gives you the feedback straight away to the students. I mean, if you do the exercises in Blackboard.
What kind of feedback though?
If you get wrong, right, or something.
Yes, I mean that's the same as question mark perception, but the students thought that wasn't enough, and I agree actually. They wanted to know, so why is it wrong? This is what we've added now. Sometimes really, which is not the best way, I admit, by just saying the correct version would have been, so at least they know. In other ways, explaining again. I mean, we didn't want to go back to the tutorial or explain it all again, but specific to that question, we often say this is the case because Helfen takes the dative, and therefore it needs to be me and not me, or something like that. So yes, it's not just right or wrong, and I got 50% of all my questions right. It's a bit more detailed feedback.
What is the difference between Blackboard tests and question mark perception?
To be honest, I can't answer the question because I haven't used the testing function with Blackboard. When I started working on this project, I talked to our education support unit and to the e-learning officer, I think is her job title. And she said, oh, the best thing you can do is use Weaver for the tutorials and question mark. At least from the software we at Bristol offer you. I mean, there might be other softwares which we don't have a license for.
Have you thought of limiting the time the tutorials are available in Blackboard so that they, for example, if you put in materials for week 1, give them 2 weeks and you limit to make them work weekly?
Yeah.
2 weeks instead of having the option of doing anything.
You would achieve, you might be able to achieve that, and then they actually do it weekly, which would be better than doing it all in one go shortly before the exam, I guess. But at the same time, it would stop those students who would like to go back to them again to revise. It would stop them from doing it. So that's why we haven't considered that.
Yes. I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, I've got a question about the contextualization of this grammar input actually. Because as I understand, it's like, I mean, do you give it in the context of the particular vocabulary that they learn as well? Because I mean, what I find like a bit discouraging for my students is when I provide them like with the grammar on its own, with the vocabulary from whatever area, and that it sort of sinks in a lot better.
Yes.
If it corresponds with the vocabulary that we cover, particularly at those beginners level, because it gives them the context, it shows them, like, okay, so this is this particular situation, we can use it, so what's
Yes.
important.
I agree, we're good to teach grammar in context. I mean, they're not beginners, so actually what the idea initially, of course, of the grammar lecture was that students come in and they actually know everything. We just have to go through those again to remind them of a few things. I mean, that turned out not to be the case for some, maybe most of the students. We've realized this year, for example, we let them write newspaper articles then, and obviously for indirect speech, they need a subjunctive, the cognitive. And we realized that this actually tutorial that comes very late, later in our online grammar course, that we need to maybe change sequences again. We had to put it towards the end because it's one of the more complicated things, so we start slowly and go through it. But this is actually where it would be very useful to do it at the time when we actually need for the newspaper articles they write. So hopefully, and there we go again, maybe we won't have less time in the future because we have to make sure that this links more with what we do, so that grammar is taught more in context, even though this is a separate online tool.
Okay, well, thank you very much.